Hello and welcome to the garden. I've got various planting and sowing jobs today. The first one is to set out my French beans. So I've got this frame here, and this is quite a different style for me. I usually either do an A-frame or a teepee, but this year I wanted to make a little bit better use of the space. So I thought if I had these canes angled away from the beds, then I'd be able to plant the French beans to climb up these canes, whilst leaving the centre of the bed free for some dwarf beans. So I'm not sure how well this is going to work. I don't know if I've got the angle of these quite right, but I'm going to see how it works this year. It should certainly free up more space down the centre of the bed, and that's quite an important thing for me this year. Otherwise, I don't know where I would be putting my dwarf beans. So I've got three varieties of climbing bean. I've got Meraviglia di Venezia, one of my favourite beans. It's a yellow, flat podded bean, absolutely delicious. I've got the classic blue Leek. That's a pretty standard green bean, but a very good one. And I've also got a purple podded bean. Now, I'm going to plant those 2 per cane. I know it's common to plant just one, and maybe even my canes are quite close together, but I've often done it this way, and I've always planted at least 2 per cane. When I sowed the beans in the cells, I put 3 in each, and then I've picked out the excess beans. We had really good germination on those, so I think for most cells I had to pick out the extra one. So there are now only 2 beans in each cell, and I think they're just about big enough now to plant out happily here. I've got a bit of a problem with my dwarf beans because only one variety has germinated. So I've got some very nice Borlotti beans, but none of my Chevrier beans. I didn't bother to re-sow those. I mean, literally nothing has germinated from, I think, 30 seeds. So that's rather disappointing. There's something not quite right with that batch, I think, when the Borlotti beans in exactly the same compost and the same size pots, everything identical, have germinated very well. So I have sown a second batch of the Borlotti beans. I'm not sure yet how many I can get in here. I'll have a look at that after I planted the climbing beans, but as soon as they've germinated, probably in a week or two, they'll be ready to plant out here with their comrades. So first to the climbing beans. So I'm going to start with the yellow bean. Make a fairly deep hole there. And that's this one. So these are quite nice plugs, lovely roots in those. And drop it in, fill it round a little bit deeper than it was in the plug, I think. Just set it nice and deep. Yeah, these look like quite nice plants. I'm quite happy with these. I'm not putting any extra feed here. This had a really thick layer of horse compost during the winter. It looks to be in quite nice condition. Right, I think I'll put the other 4 yellow beans on the other side, and here I think I'll put the blue Leek. Which one's that? So now on to the purple podded bean. And these are really attractive plants because you don't just get the purple colour on the pods, you get this purplish stem and the purple veining in the leaves. Makes for quite an attractive plant. And again, pretty nice root systems. I think these should settle down quite happily in here. Okay, so it's really hot today, so although I haven't finished my planting here, I think I will water these in straight away. I think I'm one of those miserable gardeners. I've been complaining about the cold for weeks, but as soon as the sun comes out, it's far too hot. Well, this is going to make my next job a little bit soggy, but never mind. Well, the question now is how many of these I can put down the centre. So I could space these something like that, or then ram them in a little bit, put 3 plants across. Well, actually these aren't 3 plants, of course, these are groups of 2 or 3 depending on how well they germinated. I am very tempted to cram them in. It won't be long before the climbing beans are up and away. They're not going to be bothered by the growth in here. I don't know. That is a finely balanced decision. I think it would be fine either way. That's probably sensible, but I don't like to be too sensible. That's what I'm going for. It's a pity the Chevrier beans haven't germinated, but I will plant these Borlotti from this end, and then later on when the second batch of Borlotti are ready, I can then plant in this area. So these are just in pots. They're reasonable sized pots. They won't have quite the root systems on that those root trainers have given. Yeah, they're just starting to wind a little bit round the bottom. This compost is ever so light. It's probably perfectly fine to plant these out now. This is probably the perfect moment. Much longer and they wouldn't be quite so good, I think. Again, I'll give those a good watering. So I managed to get 9 plants in here at the moment. I've got 1 spare, but I've got another dozen on the way, and I think I will be able to fit exactly that many plants in. I've just moved under cover to keep out of the afternoon sun while I tackle a problem with my leeks. Now, the way I normally grow leeks is in the traditional manner. I produce some young seedlings and drop them into holes in the ground, and I grow them on for full-size leeks towards the end of this year and through into the next. Now, I suppose you could do this 2 ways, whether you're starting in a seed bed or then in a container like this. You can either go direct from the seed bed or the container into the ground, or you can move them on in an intermediate step, and that's not always necessary. If you've got a large container and you've spaced them out well, they can grow on to a reasonable size and they'll be good for planting out. Now, this is where I've made a mistake this year, because in previous years I've always had that intermediate step. So I've sown them fairly close together, I've split them up and moved them on where I can sort of select the best specimens, space them out nicely, and then grow on stronger plants to transplant to their final positions a little bit later. Now, some years I would be doing that final transplant around about now, so either late May or then early June. So this year I made a bit of a mistake because I didn't move these on, and I should have done that probably, I don't know, at least a month ago. They were certainly in the sort of condition where I could have done that a month ago, and then I should have some much better looking seedlings. And because I'd left it so long, I then thought, well, there's no point in moving them on at this stage, I'll just plant them straight out. But I've had a look today and they're just far too small. I don't think they're really going to be growing well in this anymore. I mean, there's more root than potting soil in this bundle now. So what I need to do is move them on, even though I'm really late with it. I will split these up, move them into larger trays and grow them on. So this year, I don't suppose I will be transplanting to their final positions until, well, at least the end of June and probably well into July. Maybe about 6 weeks in these new trays would be ideal for them. It may mean that the leeks don't attain a particularly impressive size this year, but I hope that I can still get a reasonable crop from them. So anyway, these need to be split up. So it's a little bit brutal really, but I can tear off a chunk of this stuff. There's no easy way to do it. A bit of shaking around, trying to tease the roots apart, but this stage where I'm just dividing that into more manageable chunks, that's a little bit brutal. But now I've got a bucket of water here and I can dunk these in, give them a good swishing around. And as you can see, the soil is washing away. And as it does so, these leeks are coming apart nicely. And you can see there's tons of root on these. Far more root than there should be, and that's why I should have moved these on. Right, so that's not too bad. Right, so now I can take the best looking specimens. That's quite nice, and I can just trim these roots a little bit because I haven't got room to get all of that into the container. And then I'll just make a good size hole here and tuck those roots down. I'm not planting too deeply. I'm setting them maybe an inch lower than they were. So that white part of the stem here is being covered. I'm setting them in about this kind of level. It's not that critical, to be honest. Just tease that out. There's so much root on these. But the one good thing about this is that leeks really don't mind transplanting. They respond really rather well to it. There are lots of plants where when you transplant them they just sulk and are very unhappy with any sort of root disturbance, but the leeks really are quite tolerant of it. I've got plenty of the seedlings, so I can choose just the strongest looking ones for now. And as always, I will keep a few spares. Well, I'll probably set out 2 of these trays, I would think. I can probably get 30 to 35 in each tray, and now they're spaced several inches apart and they're going to be able to grow on much better now, and hopefully I can get some thicker specimens for planting out. These are not nearly wide enough or tall enough for planting out at the moment. They would really disappear into those, I don't know, 6-inch deep holes. I'll also trim any rubbish off the tops of these. That won't do them any harm at all. So once I've finished these, I will move these trays into a fairly shady spot in the garden for at least a few days while they get settled down in here. I will keep them fairly moist during that period. It won't take them long to recover from the transplant. These are looking a little bit on the weak side, so I'll put those aside for now. I can always come back to them later if I need to, but there's no need for me to move on something like that. That's just far too weedy. Now, if they were all like this, I would have been very tempted to plant them straight out, but unfortunately, this one is rather an exception. I've got a nice cool spot here up against the fence. It's in the shade for most of the day, so I think that will be ideal for these for a few days till they get themselves established in their new home, and hopefully in some weeks' time they'll be looking better for planting out. So that's 3 trays of the leek sorted now. There's 35 in each tray, so that's far more than we need. But that will let me be a little bit choosy when I come to plant them out. Now, it's a pity that they're going to be delayed this year, but that's my own fault for neglecting the young seedlings. But anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.